Council members Dillon, Gearbaugh, McClellan, Rhodes, Tahar. We are waiting on Councilman Seo. From city staff, we have City Manager Campbell and Clerk Royal. Those of you who are in the audience, we appreciate you being here, and if you would be so kind to sign in the back to my left, we would appreciate it. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted unless there are amendments. Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes as submitted, sir. Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. All those in favor of approving the agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it and the motion carries unanimously. We have one discussion item this evening, and it is actually not a permanent farmers market structure as much as it is the farmers market. In your packet you received several letters from vendors and interested parties regarding their thoughts on our farmers market. We have an additional letter that was received, I think, earlier this afternoon that I'll let the clerk distribute. And then Mr. Matt Zahn, who will be presenting in just a moment, provided you a hard copy of his PowerPoint, which he will be going over again momentarily. Let me be very clear on what the purpose of tonight's work meeting is. First of all, as everyone is aware, Mr. Matt Zahn put in a lot of time and energy investigating the feasibility of a permanent farmers market structure at or near Henny Field on Bennett Street. And of course that will be discussed, what his findings were, what the reaction was from key stakeholders and community members. But also the discussion tonight is going to be on the future of the farmers market, where we've been and where we're going. So in addition to Matt Zahn, we have Nancy Crisp here, who's been our long time, in fact our only managing director of the farmers market, and she's done an excellent job for many years. The farmers market, needless to say, is important. It is valued by our citizens. I apologize for what's going on with the lights. It's distracting to me. The farmers market is again valued by our citizens. They appreciate the services and amenities, and I think we all have a shared mutual goal, which is we want this farmers market to succeed and prosper and grow and mature into the future. And so I thought it was appropriate to have a discussion with Matt, with Nancy, and with everyone on council to talk about where we're going and how we can best achieve our mutual goals. So I didn't mean for that to be protracted and long-winded. I hope that provides some parameter and context to where the discussion is headed this evening. Mr. Campbell, I don't know if you have anything to add at this point. No? Are there any questions? Well, then let's begin. Nancy, if you'll indulge us, let's begin with Matt's PowerPoint, and then we'll turn it over to you. Matt, we appreciate you being here. Again, everyone on council has a copy of your PowerPoint, but take as much time as you'd like to go over it. And again, we appreciate all of your efforts and work on this issue. It's really important, so thank you.
So as you know, council members, I think the majority of the council members as well as city leadership have already seen this presentation during my whole process. So this is really for those, maybe Terry hasn't seen it, and definitely for the public. So a little bit about the process. My idea was to create a community asset in Saline. And a farmer's market, the way I was envisioning it, was a 4-season complex. And looking at the space that we had in downtown, or what was available in Saline, I identified the spot on Henny Field, or on Bennett Street, that I thought would be a good site. I'll show a little bit. I'll show that to you a little bit later. But again, the process, I started back in December. I got guidance from Brian and Todd as to who I should be talking to in the community. You can see who I talked to, business owners and various groups. I also spent time with the Ann Arbor Farmers Market manager, the Ypsilanti Farmers Market manager, visited their sites, talked to the one in Chelsea, met with the owner of Argus Farm Stop. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's like a farmer's market, but it's 6 days a week is what it is. And it complements the farmer's market in Ann Arbor. And then I also spent time talking to the Michigan Farmers Market Association about their rapid market assessment, just to figure out what that is, as well as funding opportunities if we were successful in moving forward with my Bennett Street idea. So today, everybody knows we've got 3 sites that we use today. We're downtown on Saturday, we're out by the Saline Library on Tuesday, and then during the winter months we use Liberty School. My idea was to put the market in a lot that is owned by the city, and I believe a portion of it is leased by the Historic Society, but put it on Bennett Street. And the reasons I like that, and we'll go to the next one, is the reason I liked it is if you take a look at this, you can see where the proposed market was. It is connected to the Depot Trail. On my conceptual drawing, we would connect the Depot Trail to Henny Street. So again, you've got a pathway, a motorized pathway to the library, to the farmer's market, to the museum, to Henny Field, and I'm looking at using the Henny Field as a gateway to the downtown area. So again, looking at the market would be the connectivity to community assets as well as sustainable assets. I thought it was a good location. This is a conceptual drawing, so again, I needed to show something to City Council. And so what I did is, we put together something. This is not the final drawing, this is just an idea. You can see there was a pathway from the Depot Trail to Bennett Street, and across the street is Henny Field. You can see how I originally looked at trying to create the structure, but then do it in phases to keep our investment down, to make sure that we really do have, legs to this project. Community vote, I guess what I did is, based on Brian's and Todd's suggestions, I had a select group of people, so I'm calling them the community. One thing that my wife told me is we really never talk to community members, right? What I did is I talked to the organizations that was suggested I talk to. And you can see the vote here. And I really don't, you can see how people voted. Apparently people might have changed their minds. It really doesn't matter, because after I got done with this phase, I sent an email to City Council saying, and this was on February 27th, that based on the response from everybody, that the proposal that I came up with was dead. So at the same time, I said, okay, so my idea wasn't accepted, but through this whole process, I learned a lot. And what I wanted to do was share those thoughts with you. So I put together 22 suggestions for you to think about and determine what is best for the community. But before we do that, I think everybody, the public, City Council, we all need to remember that the farmer's market isn't Nancy's market, it's not the city's market, it's the community's market. So if we want to have the best market, everybody needs to help shape it. So on this slide, I think the most important thing is number 4, establishing a market advisory commission or committee. Brian, I'm not sure what it would be, but it's something like that, a group, a team. And in Ann Arbor, they have one, and I think it's a good idea because they meet monthly. It consists of city officials, the market manager, vendors, and community members. And so what that does is allows people to bring ideas to that team and figure out, and get responses, I guess. So I think that is probably very important. We had one here in Saline, and I don't know why it died, but it died, and I just think we should reestablish that. Taking a look at other markets in the area, kids' activities, music, demonstrations like food demonstration, cooking demonstrations. I think that would be good to have in our market, and the reason for that is because you're bringing community members to the market. So the vendors, the longer we keep people at the market, the more they'll end up buying. By having activities like this, I think it will help the market, and not only the market, but also the business owners. And what I'm doing is, all I'm doing is mirroring what I'm seeing at other markets. On this house page number 22, I came up with, all right, so the proposal I came up with on Bennett Street is not what the community wants, which is fine. So then back in 2007, the city spent dollars to have a proposal put together for a permanent structure in Lot 4. And so my question is, if we think a permanent market is important and it is a community asset, then maybe we need to revisit that again and figure that out. But if we do that, we have to hold both Saturdays and Tuesdays markets downtown. And the reason you do that is because you're making a significant investment for that structure. And so that means we have to really figure out how to utilize it. And we probably have to figure out how to utilize it more than just for the farmers market, but for artist markets or whatever events that could be held downtown. But again, that's going to cut into our parking, which I think is a concern. And then also, one of the farmers mentioned, they were disappointed that every time there's a significant event in downtown, you move the farmers market. And so you take them out of lot 4 and you move them over behind, and I apologize, I don't know the lot behind Max, but that lot over there, right? And so we need to respect the farmers market for what it is and recognize that it is important to us and acknowledge that, I guess. And so I think we need to look at that, as well as if you have festivals. I don't know if you can have the Oktoberfest and Summerfest in those areas. I think you almost have to move them out because, again, I think it restricts those festivals.
Good.
Again, you all received a much more detailed package. I was not planning on reviewing that package with you, but again, many of that, or most of it, you've already seen before. So,
Great.
Questions?
Yeah, why don't you join us at the table, Matt, and we'll work our way around. I'll start with Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes and then end with Mr. Gearbaugh. Do you have any comments or questions for Mr. Zahn regarding his presentation and his I guess not research, but this initiative that he spearheaded?
No questions, but again, I'd like to commend you for the effort that you put into it and for helping us to recognize that the farmers market is an important element within our community, and we need to make sure that it's treated appropriately. So, thank you.
Very good. Please remember to speak into the microphones. That goes for everybody. No, you're fine. You're fine. Ms. Tahar?
Yeah, no questions at this time. I had taken, I will comment, I had taken the vote page more seriously than you appear to have meant it. So I did some work on following up with all the people listed and found that the responses were quite a bit more, maybe, let's say, nuanced than for and against. But if we're sort of brushing that aside, I won't pursue it further.
Very good. Mr. C.
Just a couple of comments. Excuse me. It would appear from your research, Mr. Zahn, there are various people for and against for a number of reasons. But it would appear that if we also would follow that we would move the festivals over to Henny Field, that would also create some discomfort, I guess, among some of those who, for various reasons, I guess, would oppose that. And maybe it's as simple as a lot of people just don't like change. I'm not sure. I guess it's kind of a conundrum to me because there are reasons to do it and reasons not to do it. Personally, I like the proposal over there by Henny Field or north of Henny Field, but I guess I understand those who object to it. So I'm still listening, trying to make up my mind.
Thank you, Jack. Why don't we jump to Councilwoman Dillon?
I just want to say that I do like the idea of having a structure and having a central location. I think the key is going to be finding the place for it that's going to be agreeable. And everyone will never agree to it, but we're going to have to figure out what's best for the community. But I do like the idea of getting rid of sort of the tent city concept because it's very weather dependent. I've been at the library when there are 70-mile-an-hour winds going through that parking lot and kids coming out of the middle school, and it's very chaotic and it seems almost unsafe at times. So I do like the idea of having a structure. Thank you.
Again, no real questions. I appreciate your work on it. I kind of did the same thing that Linda did today. It was so nice outside. Walked down and got lunch and talked to a few people, and again, the consensus was that they like it to be downtown because of, at least the people that I talked to, because of the business. And, you know, even if it doesn't support their business on a Saturday morning, it's nice to kind of have the hustle and bustle and just kind of have the feeling. And it's my neighborhood too, so that was kind of the consensus of a couple of my neighbors. But I do like the idea of having a permanent building or a permanent facility where that would be. I know you would put a lot of work into the Bennett location, and I like the idea of having something down there, whether it ended up being a farmer's market or a venue for community events, an amphitheater kind of a thing. Something down there I think would be nice to utilize Henny Field more. Whether it's the farmer's market, I'm not sure.
Councilmember Gear.
I would just like to say that I think our farmers market has been extremely successful. I mean, it started almost 20 years ago. It was considered back when we were starting to look at these and all the communities were starting. We were one of the newer ones that was actually adding it. I think we've been very good at what we've had. Mr. Rhodes has been able to help it expand from being just uptown to the 3 different locations, dealing with it all year round. I think it's been a great approach. A permanent structure, if it's a feasible thing that we can do and it's affordable and something that the community wants to contribute to, is not an objectionable item. The question is, what are our priorities at this point in time, and you know where the funding is going to come from. I know communities such as Farmington Hills have put in a structure where significant funding came from donations and basically a fund drive for that type of thing. As to location, the one aspect I do know, and I think continues to be a concern, is that the idea was to drive traffic downtown and trying to get it downtown. How that will impact it if we move it to some other location to continue that approach, that would be the big driver that I think determines where the location is. As for the depot, I think part of the idea was when the society was looking at leasing the property was to concern how can they develop that with the depot and making something inappropriate. I still would like to support a master plan for that site before we just basically move into one item. I think that's more of an issue of how do we incorporate that as a museum, how do we incorporate it with all the other aspects that we need to do at this point in time. As for a change in the farmer's market from the approach, it's been very successful in terms of being cost effective. It's managed to cover its costs, it's managed to bring in people what it is and basically hold up to the quality and standard that's there. And that's something that I think I want to make sure that we continue to do. And whatever leadership or however it plays forward is one of our main goals, is that the vendors appreciate it, that we appreciate it, that we continue to use it as an economic tool that drives our businesses downtown to support them again, and basically to be something that we can use as a advertising approach that is a community that we want people to be downtown and using that. So that's kind of how I'm seeing this market.
Very good. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Zahn? Mr. Seal, please.
Just one other thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been to a number of farmers markets. We spend the weekends over in our boat on the west side of the state, and frequently on weekends the women like to take us out shopping. So inevitably we go to towns like South Haven, to Grand Haven, to a number of other places. And I've always been impressed to see their farmers markets. Even the small town where we have our boat, Montague, has a farmers market. And it has a permanent structure built in a place that's dedicated to being a farmers market. So that has some appeal to me. The idea of trying to, even when it first arose, the idea of trying to build something down here in this parking lot behind Benny's Bakery, next to Mr. Grossman's former office there, didn't appeal to me because it's trying to fit something in that should be a parking lot. And I think it would minimize the use of the parking lot at a time when parking downtown is a critical issue. We're exploring how to expand parking. And if we build a structure down there, I think it's kind of counterintuitive, at least the way I see it, to the primary function of parking cars. Like I say, I'm still listening, but I see pros and cons to both. And I do think a farmer's market, like Mr. Gearboss says, is an integral part of our community. I've seen it as an integral part of a number of other communities. And in South Haven, where it's very successful, it is somewhat removed from the main downtown area. And in Montague, it's removed from the main downtown area. It's off to the side in a parking lot, or off of a parking lot. So I've seen it work both ways, seen it successful both ways.
Thank you, Councilman.
That's why I'm confused.
It's okay to be confused. Just be honest about it. Well, I appreciate everyone's comments, and to sort of echo what Jack just articulated. I really think that collectively, as a council, as a city, as a community, we need to view the farmers market as a community asset, because that's really what it is. And so again, Matt, I appreciate your work on this. You put a lot of time and energy into this proposal, and we appreciate that. I think there's a lot of good insights and thoughts and good discussions that came out of this process. I do want to be clear, just to settle any confusion that exists in the community. It is an enumerated goal of council to identify a permanent location and structure for our farmers market. But as was alluded to and mentioned by Councilman Gearbaugh and others, not only are there issues involving location and logistics and funding, but also finding a site that seems suitable and appealing to community members and vendors. So while that is a goal, there are a lot of variables and a lot of issues that need to be resolved before that is realized. So I just want to be very, very clear on that. Again, we have had a very successful farmers market. We're very blessed that there has been no turnover in the position of executive director. There's the founding executive director who's still with us today. We appreciate your time, Nancy. I know you have some material that you may want to go over and pass out. Why don't you have the floor, if you want to maybe give a brief overview of where we've been and where we're headed, and then we'll open it up for questions and comments from the dais, if that sounds okay. Can I make sure you're talking to a mic, though?
Well, I thought about what I would say to all of you, and just to know I'm a farmer at heart. I run the market from that point of view, and so small town farmers market is the way I look at it. The most important aspect of the market are the vendors. So I spent 16 years developing relationships with vendors and making sure their needs are being met, and we're like a big family. I've also spent time to make sure that there's a lot of positive energy in the market, because it can so easily go the other way. So I want you to know I've worked hard at that, and so if something negative comes in, we want to really take a look at it and say, tell me your concerns. I want people to come to me. And having it downtown, that's where, at the time, Mayor Driscoll, she says, we want a farmer's market. She came to me, asked me if I wanted to start one, and they wanted it downtown on purpose. So that was the whole idea, to get more business downtown. We actually looked at two places, and one was where we moved to during Summerfest behind Max, on East Henry, and the one where we are now. And this is the one that seemed the nicest because it was so prominent. It's right out there. So when I think about all the years I put in, it's really just really getting to know all the vendors, making sure their needs are met, and making it really down home kind of thing. So when we start talking about bigger business, then you're putting me a little bit out of my element. The thing that I've tried to do is keep track of all of our income, all the bookwork. That's a lot of detail there, and I spent a lot of time doing that. Tonight, I went through, and our income since 2000, well, for the last 3 years. My seasons are from May to April. So the last few years, our income has gone down about 5.5% per year. 1 year it was down a little bit more. Well, I think that's due to all the markets that have popped up, for one thing. But also this year, you might want to take one of these and pass it around. This year, the indoor market went down. And I don't know exactly why. Did I give you? I'm not sure what I gave you. And we're looking at that. Why? Except that you think the indoor market between January and March doesn't have produce except for apples. So people come for their apples, their eggs, and their cheese. And then there's a lot of baked goods and crafts. So that particular market, I'm going to give you too much.
Just take the top one, folks.
Yeah, I'll take my notes back.
No, Mr. Gearbaugh, you. Yeah, okay.
And so the indoor market I think we need to get a little more creative, and I asked the vendors, we had a vendor meeting, and I said, you know, what I would like, instead of an advisory committee, my view is more of a Friends of the Market, and I kind of patterning it after Friends of the Library. Talked to Linda a little bit about that. And the reason is because I want volunteers. I want it together. I don't want people just to tell me what to do. I want people to actually say they will do it. And the vendors said yes, they were interested, and I do have one customer that said yes, we're still working on it, and that maybe we'll begin this process and see what we can do with the indoor market, see if we can build up maybe the events that Matt talked about. I don't know if the events will bring more people in. It's kind of hard to measure. I mean, I advertise in a lot of different places, and it's just hard to measure. So that's my idea about putting a group together. And I haven't gone any further than that. That's what's new on my agenda. Otherwise, I just commit to doing all of the work it takes to make sure the market is running, trying to keep it, the liability down, making sure things are in place and the vendors are in their spot. I'm amazed at how often I think about the market during the week. I don't work that many hours at it. It sure is on my mind a lot. So, you look over the figures, you can kind of see sort of the ups and downs, and I don't particularly have any clue as to exactly why that is. It's harder, the vendors are the ones that do the sales. I haven't really asked a lot for their income. I think that's none of my business, although some vendors have offered. And the apple vendor at the indoor market said he was up 20%. And then other craft people, they don't know if they want to come back. Their sales are down. So it's a little confusing. It's sort of, up and down. So is there any questions?
Well, first of all, Nancy, this is very helpful. And let me, because when you and I spoke last week, I mentioned that I would reiterate this point, which I think is absolutely critical. And I emphasize a lot following the proper protocol. But you were very emphatic on this, and I appreciate that. When anyone, from whether it be a member of city council, a member of staff, or a member of the general public has a question or a concern or hears of an issue relating to the farmer's market, Nancy is more than willing to take your call, meet with you, communicate via email, but it's important to go to the source so that these issues can be resolved, and I appreciate your commitment to doing that.
Thank you. And I might add to that, anytime something comes to the city, usually to Todd, he always turns it over to me, and I really felt good about that.
Good. Well, I'm going to open it up for questions and comments, and again, I'm going to start on the opposite side, so I'll begin with Gearbaugh and with Mr. Rhodes. So, Councilman Gearbaugh?
Just a couple things, Nancy. Have you noticed the mix changing in terms of, I remember when we first started this out, that the idea was to be just primarily produce and so forth, and everything was expanded to crafts and more of that type of thing. Do we see a bigger change going one way or the other, or is it staying?
Not in the outdoor markets, but the indoor market, of course, there's a lot more crafts, especially during the winter hours, or at the winter time. But in the outdoor, not so many crafts. They just don't come. More baked goods lately, more food.
And your repeat or returning vendors, has that gone down or up, or is it maintained the same percentage over the years?
I don't know if it's maintained the percentage, but there are some very loyal vendors that come back all the time.
Have you seen any of them trying to rotate between the farmers markets over the months?
Oh, yes.
So they are kind of gaming it during.
Yes. Well, one of my vendors this year, I don't think it was Deb that said that they have to go to more farmers markets just to get the piece of the pie, because there's so many of them to go to. They have to spread themselves. It used to be able to, in Saline, they got more income because more people from the towns outside would come to our market, but now they have their own.
So now they're heading to Pittsfield or some of the other ones on that piece. If you were to say we needed to mix it up or add more to it, would you expand it to allow more different types of products or things being put into it? Because I know the idea is the farmer's market should be locally grown to maintain integrity of what it is and everything. Do you feel that we're there, or do we need to change it at any aspect, or?
Right at the moment, I think we're there. I'm not really inviting any more of the produce people into our downtown Saturday market because the ones we have such an abundance, and we have enough, and so that's the way I'm balancing it. There is there's some things we'd like to have that we don't. I mean, we have chicken, but we'd like to have more meat. Well, we've got a vendor that's going to have that. And I have had vendors with meat kind of come and go. The one thing about vendors, if they come to me and they're committed, then I know they will stay. To go out and try to convince them to come in isn't as effective. So I'm always happy when they come and I see what I can do about keeping them. The one in the indoor market that we dearly love, they said, but we can go locally, and why drive all the way to Saline? And so that's a little heartbreaking. And yet, it's good business sense for them. So it really is, yeah, I think that we don't really need anything in addition necessarily to the markets. The indoor market is, no, I think we're pretty good. I'd have to think about that, but.
So part of your role is balancing it to make sure that the vendors feel that they're getting enough of a return to want to come back, so that
Yes.
they're competing with SE Shelton within the.
And for the number of customers that come through right now, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Ms. McClellan?
That was one of my questions, is how you regulate the variety, the variety of, is it sort of a natural thing that happens, or do you have, like, I know I want to have, 2 vendors with this type of product, 4 vendors with this kind of thing?
Yeah, it's more natural. Sometimes I'll think, well, that might be too many, but I have a feeling that vendor won't stay, and that happens. So it really, I just use my intuition for the years.
And then my other question, and I think we kind of answered this already, but is there something that's missing that you'd like to see? It's either from vendors or from customers, or just kind of your grand wish
I think
list?
one thing I'd like to encourage this year is to have the vendors reach out more through their Facebook page, through their own advertising, particularly in the indoor market. And even some selling techniques. I've noticed some of the vendors that come in are real novice. And my son even offered to do a class for the indoor market on selling. He gave his opinion that sometimes they're not reaching out. And I thought, well, that would be interesting. Yeah, so that once the customers get there, then it's completely up to the vendors. I'm out of it then. And so they're the ones that need to pull that sales in. So that would be nice. And I have to think about other things. Maybe a little bit more volunteer for me, so that if an idea comes up, I don't have to even think about it. Somebody else will take it and run with it, and then I can just make sure all the rules are being followed. That would be good. Okay.
Anything
That's
else?
it for me for right now.
Excellent. Councilwoman Dillon?
I'm going to talk about numbers again. Do you track patrons? Is there any way that you've ever checked head counts of how many you're getting in at markets?
I did, well, I didn't, it was offered, one of the vendors offered to do that at the indoor market this year. I don't really ask for that, it's just me, I don't have that. And we have 4 entrances to the downtown market, so there's just no way. Now, I've had a vendor kind of estimate it, he tracked it at one point, but it's not on a regular basis. But the indoor market, they did track it this year, and that was kind of helpful to know, because we have between 250 to 350, I believe it was. And so if you look at that, that's not too bad for in the middle of winter. So who's actually getting the business is what I was looking at. Yeah.
That would be the second part of my question is there a way that the vendors can track? We don't need to know what their dollars are, but how many customers they're having per occasion, so that we can sort of figure out, okay, who are people going to? Which are the most profitable ones? Which are the most, in demand
Well, I
vendors?
probably-
Because I think that there might be some that are just, low-hanging fruit, and then you've got some that just sort of need to maybe go away, that are just taking up space. And so I'm just wondering if maybe there is an opportunity to explore that and find out exactly which vendors people are soliciting.
Well, we would have to talk about each market individually.
Right. Which I think they are right now, and that's the other issue, is that they're three completely separate markets. They have different demographics, and it's just, you do have some repeats that are going to them, but I mean, I think that they're, and that is one of the better things about having the three locations, 3 different times, is that it gives other people an opportunity. That if you couldn't make it at this time, you know, there's always the Tuesday. Same with summer and the winter, although the hours are the same. Some people don't want to be outside, whether it's warm or cold, so they prefer the Liberty School method. But you can't bring your dog.
So help me understand your,
What I'm wondering is if you could track the number of people coming through, and then of those people, who's actually buying and from whom?
pretty tricky. It's an idea.
I mean, to be honest, it seems almost like you could stand at the top of the stairwell of the building overlooking the parking lot and just do some photos down and just get a basic head count, you know, bird's eye head count that way, at just snapshots of time frames. You know, is it early morning? Is it later in the day? Because the other side of the downtown is, you know, are the businesses open at those times? You know, are more people coming later in the morning so they could tie it into a lunch at one of the restaurants that doesn't open until noon? You know, is all the good produce gone by then? You know, should there be a time change? Or is the early morning, you know, the better hour?
Well, the best people to ask that to are the vendors.
Right.
Yeah, so I could take a poll of the vendors. That would probably be more effective because they see patterns.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the other thing I had is that your income is solely from booth sales?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, except we do have T-shirts and hoodies.
Okay.
But that's not,
But you don't get a percentage back from vendors?
no,
Okay.
no.
Anything else, Councilwoman?
That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Very good. Councilman Seal?
I was confused in your presentation. I thought you said you didn't ask the vendors what their sales were, and yet how do you aggregate these figures for sales?
That's what they pay to be part of the market.
Okay, so this is your.
This is the rate.
Gotcha. Oh, I see. Oh, that clears that up. I guess that's the only thing I really.
Thank you, Councilmember Seal. Councilwoman Tahar?
Yes, thank you. So as I was reviewing the material and thinking about this and talking to people, and of course, we've talked a little bit on a couple of Friday mornings at the library about having a volunteer group of friends doing work. And then also listening to what you said about your focus being on the vendors and creating community. That's a big job. And the other, as I've been thinking about this over the last little while, it seems clear to me that there are many, many aspects to this, and maybe more than one person. I think that what you've described with dealing with the vendors is the key, a key thing. It's absolutely fundamental. But there are a lot of other things that might be paid attention to, and some of those are in some of Mr. Zahn's suggestions and comments and ideas. So for me, the idea of having a group of volunteers or some kind of group that included real stakeholders in the process, like a vendor or two and you and interested community members, to share the work, do some of the other things that maybe are not so central to what you've been doing, like thinking about advertising. One of the things, for example, that I thought about was we don't really emphasize, although if you go to the market, you know it's all local, but it's not one of the things we use as a selling point for the market when we advertise it. And right now, in the locavore culture, that's a big deal. So a group, and one of the things I've learned in lots of areas is one person can't think of everything. So I really encourage us to think about the idea of having some sort of group, however we define it, that would generate other ideas about how to make the farmers market even better. Although I'm a regular customer, I think it's great. But I just think one person can't do it all, and one person can't have all of the ideas. So having a group to generate other ideas and also, very importantly, to do the work would be a great thing. So that's one thing. And then then we have the question about permanent structure. Which I think is a completely separate issue. So the other thing I would encourage us all to do is to be clear about what problem we're solving when we think about this. Like, what are the issues that need attention and how to solve them? Because you don't solve the advertising or the locavore issue or meet it by doing a permanent structure. It's a completely separate thing. So I think we need to organize how we approach this in what are we trying to accomplish, and then figure out how best to do that. I mean, it was really clear in the beginning. I think we wanted something downtown to draw people downtown. That was the real focus. So maybe now it's a mature market, and we can branch out. That was a little bit of a ramble.
No, it was very good. Thank you, Mr. Hart. Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes.
Yeah, Nancy, thank you for the data. We have the income here. Do you have the expenses that correlate to these?
I do, but the
Numbers?
expenses are for all three markets.
Sorry, if we could compare the bottom line, total income, total expenses, because I don't know how that works out right now.
To zero. I'm making it so that it comes out to zero and each year. And if there is an expense that I can't quite cover, it goes into the next year. But the whole idea is to make sure I don't go over. But I come close. Now this year, I had to drop some advertising. We're down income, and I'm determined to stay within budget. And this is the first time since we started that I've been this tight. But I'm gonna do it.
And
It's just
that may be an issue for council then to talk about, because at least in business, if your income is down, you're encouraged to do more advertising to bring more people in. And so maybe we have to decide, are we going to periodically or maybe on a regular basis subsidize the market to some extent, particularly if we're looking for you and or others to do more.
Yes.
We don't expect you to do it for free, so money's got to come from someplace, and if we're not
Well, I'm
bringing in vendors, we need to bring in dollars.
I'm trying to do more of the stuff that doesn't cost money, except my time. Facebook and more social media, and like I say, engaging the vendors. So I think there is more ways of getting it out there, but that's a great idea. I'd like to look at it.
We're kind of short on time, so I'm going to wrap it up. I am going to add the farmers market as a discussion item at our first council meeting in June, because I want to be very thoughtful about this. But I think it's clear from the discussion, and the group can correct me if I'm wrong, that there are some short-term and long-term goals and solutions, for lack of a better way to define it, that have been presented this evening. I think clearly there is consensus, or at least I'm hoping there is, to establish some sort of friends group or advisory board to assist Nancy. I quite frankly, I don't care what you call it, but I think in the short term that should be something that's established and that meets on a semi-frequent basis and doesn't only include vendors, but ideally maybe some long-term repeat customers, maybe even a representative from City Council. I think to Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes' point, I think as we look a few years out, we need to think very strategically acknowledging that the farmer's market is a community asset, we may need to subsidize the initiative a bit more, especially on the advertising front. And if we're expecting more from the executive director, then possibly we need to expand the hours and thus the level of compensation for the position. I agree that many of the issues that we discussed tonight are not necessarily interwoven with a permanent structure, although since it is a goal of this council and the city, I hope that that's something that we consider that we continue to discuss. But I think that's probably more of a longer term goal and not short term like the advisory board dealing with some of these issues relating to the manager and marketing and advertising. So again, June, what is our next meeting? June 6th, it'll be a discussion item on the regular council meeting agenda. I wish we had more time, but this was a good discussion tonight. Do you have your
So
little
we
thing?
don't have time for one of my vendors to,
We have time for public comment.
okay.
And do you have your light timer with you? You are afforded, of course, if we refer back to our agenda, everyone who wishes to make a public comment, you're afforded 3 minutes. I am running a little bit short on time, so I would encourage you to keep it brief. I can't force you to keep it brief, but I want to encourage you to keep it brief. But at this time, we would entertain any public comment. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. And please come forward to the podium and the microphone if you wish to speak. Actually, it's the other side.
Yeah, it's okay, I'll do everything for you, no problem. Excuse me, Deb.
My name is Deb Marks, and I am a vendor at the farmer's market. I have been there for 9 years at the summer market. I've gone to the winter market. I went to the Tuesday market for 1 year. The summer market is definitely the most awesome market I have, and I attend 6 markets this year. Nancy's done a great job. She works hard. She takes care of problems. Anytime something comes up, she does it. She's very good at her advertising, and we do realize that advertising prices go up. And so with the money she's got to use, she may not be able to do as much as she used to do. She is good at Facebook. She's always out there taking pictures. As far as vendor count, I would say it has one of the highest counts coming through the summer market that there can be. And I am a produce vendor. I would say I'm one of the bigger vendors, not necessarily the biggest, but produce is what people come for. I even questioned some of the vendors on Saturday because I knew they were vendors that come week after week at the summer market, but they don't come to the winter market. And so I said, why don't we ever see you at the winter market? And all of them replied, well, there's no produce. There still is eggs, there's cheese, there's baked goods, there's some meat, there's produce for a little while, but when it gets into the winter, here in our area, it's hard to grow produce. And yes, some of us are starting to grow under high tunnels and in greenhouses, but there's not that much bounty. So some of them come once in a while, but they can't come the whole time. So I've questioned whether we need to have a winter market from January through March. You know, maybe people get tired of it. In the winter, you see crafts. You only buy crafts once in a while. And I mean, Nancy tries to get all the people in that have something other than crafts in addition to the crafts to make it a better winter market. But your summer market is definitely the way to go. As far as a structure would be great, but I would like to see it right where it's at. The other thing is people don't want to go out of town. When we've asked them, they said, no, that's too far. We don't want to go out there. We want to stay in downtown. They've come for a cup of coffee in the morning. I mean, we see people carrying coffee around that come from several of the restaurants. We see them carrying their bag of pretzels. So we know that they've come for both reasons. I I just think it's a win-win situation when it's in the downtown.
Thank you for your comments.
You're welcome.
Are there any additional public comments? Please.
Good evening. I'm Dave Jebb from Dave's Honey. I'm a Saline beekeeper, a commercial beekeeper, and I've attended usually the Tuesday market. I was at the winter market. And so let me just say that there's two discussions going on here. One about how we can improve marketing and revenue in the farmers market, and the other one about this building, this concept of putting something together. I'm going to talk about the latter. Most of us have seen farmers markets actually sweeping the country. I mean, they've become very popular, and they not only increase the local economy, but they are really important for developing community relationships and people coming to the market to not only buy goods, but to visit and to share their time with their friends and neighbors. Much of our nation's food supply, as you probably may know, travels anywhere from, statistically, from 1,500 to 3,000 miles before it reaches your dinner plate in the evening. And one of the real benefits about having a farmer's market is the fact that you have local produce being grown right in this community. And the greenhouse gases and the carbon footprint and so on really benefits our global planet community as far as supporting this type of activity. So I think there's all kinds of reasons why we should support a farmer's market, and I'm probably going to sound kind of redundant because it sounds like most of my council members here are on board with this, but let me just reiterate. People love the market for many reasons. My observations, people come to the market because it's a place to gather, share impromptu conversations. Some people really get off on seeing stuff that's grown locally and tasting things and so on. But there's some of the spin-off things that benefit our community, and I want to reiterate what those are in my opinion. The farmers market actually provides a viable customer base for local businesses. We all agree on that, I believe. Creates new opportunities, providing entrepreneurs a low-cost entry into retailing. A lot of people that come into the market are new in retailing. It supports farmers, artisans, and fledgling entrepreneurs. Promotes local culture, town meeting place for the community. Creates a model for self-determination for local economies. Reflects Saline's historic connection to agriculture. I think that's a big one. Greater use of Saline's bike trails and footpaths around the museum and the parklands, and so on. So not only is we going to keep the money local here in town when we have a farmer market going on, but we have just a lot of good things for the people that attend these events. And so I just want to support Matt's vision for the farmers market and proposed development for this plan. And the main thing is we need leadership and vision. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there additional public comments? Please.
I was part of the farmers market week before last, and I witnessed firsthand what a terrific job Nancy does up there. She does a great job of directing everybody, answering questions, and getting the thing going. However, I do think that as town begins to grow and the townships around us are growing, we're going to need a permanent structure sometime, somewhere. Should we choose the Bennett Street plot for a new permanent farmers market, I would be in favor of it if the architecture of the farmers market were to complement the depot. If you've been to Dexter lately, at their depot, they did some new construction across the street from it, and it did a complementary architecture to the depot, sort of that 1880s, 1870s look to it. It's very attractive. So if we do choose the Bennett Street lot for a new farmers market, that would be my desire. I think the architecture would work with the depot. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Additional public comments?
Mary Hess, all I am is a senior taxpayer and former council member. I think when they were doing the 5-year capital improvement, there was talk between $200,000 to $300,000 for a parking structure. About 8 months ago, they talked about $250,000 for Merchants Park. And it appears we're $250,000, a little bit over on our budget. And so therefore, there are concerns of cost. I enjoy the farmer's market. I go up to the farmer's market, and I like where it's at. But to make a permanent structure, I'm sorry, the weather that's the way I was raised on a farm too. And if it's bad weather, you just put on a raincoat or whatever. I really have a problem with the expenditure of a structure. And when we talk about buying another parking lot, because 22 parking places are used for the farmer's market, it has to have something congealing. As far as I think that when we're talking about the cost, to say that's like we ask people, do you want this? Oh yeah, I want it. But nobody puts the cost of what this could be. And maybe it was 300 and some, I don't know how much was being proposed. But that should be a question. I had no idea as a taxpayer how this was going a month ago, and through the courtesy of our council members, getting on Facebook and telling is one of the reasons I'm here for the early part of the meeting. But when it comes into priorities, of fire department, police departments, water and sewer, I would hope that the council would put it and enjoy what we have, but watch our commitments.
Are there additional public comments? I need to ask people, again, I can't force you to limit your comments, but we are running short on time here. Please.
Hi, I'm David Jebb. I live at 77 Nichols Drive. I just wanted to talk about currently, I'm also a mother of 2 kids, and I'm also the local archaeologist working at the Salt Springs. And in terms of when I go to the farmer's market with my kids, compared to some of the other farmer's markets, it's a bit depressing, or it's just not a lot of fun, especially the winter one. It's just kind of in these hallways of a school, and we like going to the Pittsfield one, for example. There's bands there playing in the summer, and there's kids activities, and it's in the middle of nowhere, but there's great parking and it's very safe. When I go to the downtown one here, there's, the parking's difficult, and I have 2 kids under 5. It's, I'm not feeling safe crossing over, well, obviously we're fixing the road right now, so hopefully that'll be a little bit safer later on. But so those are just some of the things that I'm thinking about, and that I really like Matt's idea of the permanent structure by the Depot Museum, because that area, I feel it's, a lot of people don't know about that Depot Museum, and just the whole area is kind of neglected, and I think it could bring a lot of attention to that area in the Henny Field. I think it'd be nice, my kids could go play there, run around, and then we can, get some snacks at the farmer's market. And in terms of people talking about, oh, it's not downtown, it's 2 blocks downtown, and I think if you look at your average customer base for farmers markets, they're not going to be, mind worrying walking 2 blocks downtown to get their coffee or their pretzels from Benny's Bakery. I think people that go to farmers markets want to live a healthy, active lifestyle, so I don't think it's too far downtown, really moving it to the Bennett Street. And then in terms of the archaeology, there are a lot of great sites as well buried right there at that Bennett Street location. So I think we would maybe do a preliminary survey or some test pits there, and we could even pull up some interesting artifacts before they put in that Matt's proposed plan, and we could incorporate that into the farmers market. That would also kind of make it a historical building with actual artifacts that were found from the area there, and I think that would kind of add an interesting edge to having the market there as well. And again, it would draw people to the museum, which a lot of the people don't even know that Depot Museum exists there. So it's just some thoughts and ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. There are additional public comments.
Hi, my name is Megan Phillips Goldenberg. I live in Saline Township. I was born, or not born in the area, but raised here, went to Saline High School. I own 2 businesses in Saline. One of those businesses is called New Growth Associates. It's a food systems consulting firm. I work across the country on using the food system to drive economic development in small communities. So I could probably talk for about 3 hours on all the things that you guys have talked about tonight. I want to say that from my perspective as a national expert in this area, that there are answers to all of your questions. There are best practices for all of the problems. I'm happy to support Saline in making good decisions regarding the farmers market. Moving a farmers market is not a trivial question. It's not a trivial decision. It has big impacts. When somebody brought up this evening about essentially splitting the customer base, customer traffic, and you don't want to do that. Anytime a farmer's market is moved from a downtown area, both downtown businesses and a farmer's market suffer in ways that they don't recover from. So I want to not take up a ton of time, but do want to highlight the importance of this decision. And I have lots of comments. I wanted to say that Saline is a model market. I hear a lot of talk across the community, across the county. Sales are down across the county. Farmers market sales are down across the county. They're down across CSAs and farms. Farmers are having to work harder for less money. But Saline remains a popular market amongst the vendors, and Nancy is a popular farmers market manager from their perspective. Direct sales to farmers markets and CSAs are also down across the country, but indirect sales are up. That is, farmers are selling more to grocery stores are selling more local foods to consumers. So you're not losing the locavore kind of mentality, it's actually growing, it's just being diverted. So in these conversations, you're gonna wanna talk to Bush's too, because they are trying to lead on this front as well. I think I'll probably leave it at that, but please consider me a resource. Please let me make this the best market it can be. And I'm sure Brian has my email, and I know Todd does. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional citizen comments? Then how about a motion to adjourn at 7:48 p.m.? Moved by Gearbaugh, is there a second? Seconded by McClellan. Thank you all for your comments. Again, this will be discussed at a future city council meeting. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned. We'll convene our regular council meeting in 5 minutes. I have to use the restroom and we have to break down these tables.